interesting alchemical device. In one of the early books of the great alchemist Lamstrich, we have a scene which shows the king, or the supreme power, moving in a whirlwind over the face of the deep. And we find the great abyss lying spread out below. And we have the scene of the power of God moving above and the great depths below. And the waters which were above the firmament were divided from the waters which were beneath the firmament. And the waters beneath the firmament were ocean. And the waters above the firmament were Shemayim, the water of life. And in the midst of these powers, in the midst of this great division that took place, there suddenly emerged the grand form of Elohim, the Creator. And the Elohim, or the builders, the seven powers, shooting out from the mystery of the Word, are suspended between heaven and earth. And here the seven powers gather together the form of the world, causing it to arise between the abyss and abyss, causing it to exist between time and eternity, and fashioning it magnificently from the abstract principle of sulfur and salt. And the seven powers which bring forth the creation, the Elohim, the vowels of the sacred word, are represented in the book of Lamstrich by Mercury, the ancient, the great power of the Kabbalah, the winged being, the messenger from heaven to earth and from earth to heaven, who carrying his mysterious rod wound with the serpent, brings forth from the below the shadow of the world form and unites it above with the descending hierarchy of the world spirit. So between these two extremes of ether and chaos, time and eternity, being and not being, and out of the great darkness that they be called England, comes forth the mystery of the primary and primordial generation. And this power, this mystery which came forth, is the world soul, described by the Greek authors as things with many heads, bearing all manner of likenesses and breaking through the age of time, formed of the age which is made by the whirlings of ether and chaos. All these symbols go right back to the same basic principle, namely that the ancients recognized that existence was the result of the striving of polarities or of opposite beings, and Einstein has come to practically the same concept. That life and life as we know it are the friction of the motions, the qualitative motions of basic energy. Not the quantitative, but the qualitative motion. And that these bring forth the revealed form of things out of the great abyss, out of the great darkness. This is the meaning of the Hindu concept that these creations came as the result of will and yoga. The duality produces between itself a being in which its own attributes are present, and this being is called the soul, the universal soul, fashioned in the womb of chaos. And this soul becomes the basis of the creation of the human soul, which in turn is the child of striving, the progeny of the mingling of heaven and earth, of time and eternity, of being and not being. The soul's man is engendered by being and not being, by realization and ignorance, by experience and intuition, by reason and love, and by the minglings of all the opposites, which goes forth into this vast psychic container, from which will be born the radiant form of the deity Satan, bursting from the age and taking power and supremacy over the dark field of mystery in which it was created or conceived. Soul, therefore, represents the objectification of spirit and matter, brought together as a being. And all things that emerge in the middle distances of man's experience are therefore distinctly related to soul itself. Now, in the further development of this same allegory, we have Adam introduced as a being into which the breath of life was breathed. Now, if we go back into the ancient Kabbalistic legends about Adam, we find that Adam's body was composed of the 7 planets, that each one of the great powers of space bestowed an attribute upon him. And each of these in turn gave a treasure to Adam, so that when he became a living thing, Adam contained within himself the 7 souls. And at that time it was also conceived that he was androgynous, male, female, in 2 forms, united back to back. And that the Lord of the Elohim cut them asunder, and made the male-female being into a male and female being. Here again is a definite allegory about the soul, for the soul itself is essentially an androgynous being. We have a story which we told you about some time ago in connection with that story of Serafita, in which we have again this allegory of the soul. This particular treatment developed according to the philosophy of Baron Swedenborg. So in the alchemical, to return to it once more, we have the union of life and chaos, of time and eternity within a bubble. We have the miniature replica of all that has been done, taking place within the soul of the human being himself, the alchemical resource. And in the study of this mystery, we find that man recapitulates by a series of renovations, or a series of augmentations, as they are termed in chemistry, the history and generation of his world, the formation of his own nature and being, and the final release of his own soul. Now, as the soul is composed of the strivings of spirit and matter, it is bound into this artificial compound by the magic wand of Hermes. It becomes essential to our subject to try to understand more about the reasons for its existence and the ultimate end for which it is intended. The reason why the soul has to have an existence is because man himself is actually a soul being. He is therefore a soul being without a body on the level of his own nature. This is due to the emblematic or symbolic fall. For by the fall, a soul fell into a body. And because of this situation, it lost identity or orientation in its own nature. As man now lives in a physical body, it was the opinion of the alchemist that he lives in exile. He is in a kind of underworld. And this physical body can never be his home and can never be his natural abode. He lives in this as a same tenant, as a condition of insufficiency and insecurity, because the being within the body is not content. The individual is not able to be completely a body, because he possesses attributes and qualities which do not belong to body. They belong to a higher level of existence than that which man at present experiences. Yet man is not by nature capable of becoming a spirit and of ascending into the abode of eternal blessedness. He is yet imperfect in many ways and in need of great experience and wisdom. But he has a home that is proper to him, and that home is a different kind of body, a body real but invisible, a body which contains within it the archetypal forms of all physical things, but is much more subtle, much more sufficient to him than the form which he now occupies. In the alchemical symbolism of the early Jewish alchemists, the fall of man, his exile from paradise, and all these things are brought into the chemical symbolism. Because it is assumed that man is a wanderer, a stranger in body, that as long as he remains completely in body, he remains in a state inferior to his natural destiny. Therefore, as his growth proceeds, as he advances in the unfoldment of his own nature, he begins to build a new body within himself, a body which originates within his own heart, for the heart is the womb of the second body. And in this heart is born within him the concept of a superior state, a concept of a life apart from body, a life not an immortality after death, but a functioning existence. A man has lived a long time, and his race has existed a long time. And just as sure as man, through his achievements, has built a complex material culture that is passed on from generation to generation, so through his inner experience, he has propagated a soul. This soul goes on and grows from generation to generation, just as his outer civilization increases. Therefore, the individual born into the world today is not born soulless. He is born as a compound of mind, soul, body, spirit. And within him is this unfinished soul, which is like the unfinished temple of Solomon the King, which is the temple of his own inner life. He therefore has a certain sharing or participating in the soul, a sharing which is greater than that of the aboriginal world. He has greater soul power than the savage. He has greater soul maturity than the barbarian. Yet he has not yet accomplished the magnum opus. He has not perfected the soul body. So as he grows up in his material life today, he grows up as a partial soul within a body. This partial soul has its dreams and its hopes and its aspirations, but it also has its limitations. It has its imaginative and creative faculties, but it is also bound by appetites and illusions in the material life around it. So each individual inherits an unfinished soul. And the completion of this soul must be left to one of two things, either to the keeping of old Father Cronus, which is time, which means that in the fullness of time, nature will perfect the soul of man, even as it perfects the diamond in the coal. But alchemy says, nature has its own path and its own way, but man may perfect art, and with art perfect nature. And it is possible for man, by the serious and contrite application of that which he knows to be true, it is possible for him to anticipate and then augment, increase the processes of growth within himself, so that he may advance the state of his own soul, that he may gradually approach the adept state of soul power. To do this is not to depart from nature, but to aid nature, and to assist the man himself in the perfection of his own inner life, which is rooted within the nature of his soul. To do this again requires a great art, a great discipline, a great science of human regeneration. And under the name of alchemy was concealed this mystical art, this mystical science, by which man might approach the actual completion of his own soul life. Now, the beginning of this transformation or transmutation was then the study of chemistry. And the alchemist was told, it's very simple. The first thing you have to find are pure elements. So the alchemist was told that he must have some way of securing his basic material upon which the experiments in the laboratory depended. He had to find a very definite and particular kind of salt. And this is the salt of the earth. This is the same kind of salt that is referred to in the biblical story. As ye are the salt of the earth. Now, how to find this salt? And the one school of alchemy, there were several, one school of alchemy says that the only way to secure this basic material was from dew. Therefore, what you had to do was to go out at night in certain regions where the dew was heavy. And you were to place glass plates raised from the ground and insulated by wood or some non-conducting substance, so that they would not ground or would not discharge their magnetic field. And you were to collect upon the surface of these plates dew, and you were to catch it or place it in vessels carefully prepared for this purpose, absolutely clean and capable of being completely and hermetically sealed. Now, this might sound like a difficult experiment, and yet I've known a number of practicing alchemists today who have succeeded right here in the mountains back and forth, San Bernardino. Some of these alchemists have been able to collect as much as 10 or 20 gallons of dew off a glass plate. It is not an impossible thing to do, because they believed in the alchemical tradition that this dew of heaven having within itself certain powers captured from the rays of the stars. Also that this dew, having never touched the earth, was like the dewy mistletoe that had to be cut from the tree without being permitted to touch the earth or it lost its power. That this dew could then be passed through certain experimentation by which the powers within it, the occult virtue of the planet, could be augmented and increased. Now, I don't want to understand experiments now in that particular rather disagreeable procedure also. I know at least one case in which a 5-gallon bottle exploded. And there was actually, within the dew, a sufficient fermentation taking place to cause a tremendous combustion and pressure. All this belongs to the physical story of alchemy. But always the alchemist was told that the great problem he must first solve was to secure pure elements for the preparation of his work. He was told, for instance, that he had to have pure copper. Not the copper you would buy even in the laboratory or in the chemist's shop, but pure copper, which could only be found under certain conditions and in certain places. Pure silver, pure gold, pure mercury. But these various elements had to be pure beyond any knowledge that he had of them. Well, the implication as you go through the story is rather obvious. The beginning of the great transmutation was to find the pure forms of the basic emotions, instincts, appetites, and attitudes of the human being. We had to find, for example, not just copper, but pure love. We had to find not just silver, but pure imagination. We had to find not zinc, but pure reason. Because each one of these elements was tied to a substance and to a planet and to a power in nature. Each one of these basic principles had to be pure. So we begin with an elaborate series of purifications, which are nothing more or less than a restatement of what were called the cathartic disciplines of classical philosophy. for these pure elements could only hope to find them within himself. In the beginning of his art was the discovery of the purity of his own basic soul power. He had to purify the energies of the soul, which he must use in the accomplishment of the great experiment. Thus was the problem presented to him that in all probabilities he would not be able to find these elements in an absolutely pure state. Consequently, his first duty after he had discovered elements suitable to his purpose was the continuance of the process of purification by fire. And that the living principle was then carried across through the resource and collected again through a process of distillation. Therefore, that the purification consisted of cycles of distillation. That these elements had to be completely distilled again and again until finally all growth matter, all impurity would be left behind. Therefore, the bodies of these minerals and metals would die, because the bodies of them could never be united anyway. There is no union to be achieved on the level of matter. Therefore, it is only when all of these are again reduced to their soul equivalent, becoming invisible like the soul itself, but captured within the disciplines of consciousness, the resource, that they can be reunited to form the basic ingredients of the stone. Let's put that then onto another level of language and try to see what we are working with. Man experiencing his own emotions and experiencing his own thoughts is not long in realizing that they are not of a sufficient quality to sustain his natural spiritual aspirations. He must therefore go through the process of regenerating the various instincts, attitudes, appetites which he possesses, refining them for the release of their soul content. Let's take one, for example, which will more or less convey the problem that we have in a simple way. Here's an individual, a person who wishes to grow. But this individual is by nature jealous. Now we might say that jealousy is an emotion which is, under some conditions, almost apparently justifiable. There are moments when it is exceedingly difficult for an individual not to express this very natural instinct. And yet jealousy is an emotional subject. Jealousy can only exist because man has a soul. The bees and the birds are not jealous. The universe beyond man is not jealous. Jealousy belongs to the soul complex in man. Therefore, it is a negative expression of soul energy. Now, we may say that jealousy is almost necessary to the human being, and that he is justified in preserving this faculty and in attempting to grow and develop and be good in spite of it. But here is the difficulty you're confronted with. The stone, which is the perfect soul, can never be cast if any of its elements are absent. And the elements of the soul must be created out of the purification of its own attributes. If jealousy remains, the soul can never be cast as the stone, because this would then become the flaw in the diamond. It would be a quality unregenerated or unredeemed, and therefore a stone not suitable to be built into the everlasting house. That particular stone had not been true. Therefore it would not fit into the wall. And if it was placed in the wall, it would weaken the wall. In the alchemical symbolism, therefore, Every one of the extensions of soul represented by the minerals and metals must be redeemed in itself before it can be mixed into the great compound of the molten sea. And the individual working with his alchemy, therefore, experiences within himself many emotions and instincts: fear, doubt, grief, pride, anxiety, worry, hate, criticism, condemnation, bigotry, prejudice. All of these are soul faculties to its basic elements. Knowledge and its effect upon man must be broken down. It must all be brought to its condition of calcination. Every idea the human being has must be tried by fire, and its dross must be burned away. To accomplish this is a great task, exciting the most earnest endeavors of the most thoughtful, conscientious, and courageous person. But by alchemy, gradually, all of these elements are reduced. And we have a very dissimilar state in other schools of mystical thinking. We have, for example, the Eastern system, where under the Guru concept of instruction, and the disciple is taught to unlearn what he has previously known, is taught to discipline himself against any extremes or intensities of his own disposition, and is finally shown how, through this complete regeneration of himself, to approach to the universal which lies beyond it. This is precisely the same implication as in the story of Alchemy. Now, having assumed for the moment that we have a grasp of the problem of basic elements, now we must pass on to the next degree of the art of the stone. Actually, what the alchemist is attempting to produce here is not immediately the transformation of his own totality, but the production of the agent of this transformation. And this agent is the red lion. Now, the red lion, of course, is another solar or sun symbol, but it is most particularly an alchemical device. It is the name given to the final formula and its production. Now, in alchemy, when all the elements and all the ingredients are brought together in an exactly perfect manner, and the experiment with all its rotations is carried through to the end, the adept achieves what is called a powder of projection. This is a small amount of an incredibly powerful agent. Paracelsus is said to have carried a small amount of this agent in the hilt of his sword after it was made for him and presented to him by the adepts of alchemy in Constantinople. The purpose of this agent is that it becomes universal in its application. It can perform any and all mysteries. One grain of this powder cast upon base metals will transmute 200,000 times its own weight into pure gold. One grain of this powder dissolved in wine will become universal medicine and will keep the individual in the same condition of life forever. One grain of this mysterious powder, if incorporated with certain ingredients and accepted into the system under a certain type of method, can produce all-knowing and the power to read every secret locked in nature. Here is the diamond soul, the diamond stone. Here is the elixir of life. Here is the universal medicine. Here is the absolute transmuting agent. this mysterious powder called the red lion. And the red lion is fashioned out of the complete agreement of the metals, in which all, having been reduced to their essential principle, they are fused together by one tremendous experiment. And out of that complete fusing, under terrific heat and combustion, yet in a completely sealed vessel, which must not leak or in any way weaken, under a strange and wonderful procedure, which appears as a miniature of the complete forming of the universe. The alchemist, watching his reaper, sees cosmos emerge from chaos, sees the ordering of all life, beholds the thunders of heaven and the rumbles of the underworld, sees lightning flashes and creatures appear and disappear within the vessel, and finally comes the great quietude that follows all this tremendous combustion. And that which is in the bottom of the vessel when it is finished is this wonderful, radiant mass, shimmering, shining like the treasure of the Rhine gold, a mysterious and priceless tincture which can become the complete mystery of universal power. What are we dealing with? What is the story? What is it that can transmute this tremendous mass of anything into true gold? Under the complete story of the casting of the stone, there's only one possible allegory that we can conceive of. The story taking place in the laboratory bottle is identical with the wonderful description given in the Eastern Scriptures of the illumination of Buddha. The magnificent experience, which is the complete recapitulation of the spiritual life of man, is illumination itself. It is the achievement of universal consciousness. Therefore, consciousness in its universal state is the mysterious outer projection. This is the red light. For one grain of it can transform 100,000 times its own weight of error into pure truth. Wherever it is turned, whatever it is done, when it's done with it, it achieves the perfection of the great work. Universal consciousness sustains all things, preserves all things, and fulfills all things. Therefore, the true adept possessing the stone is the individual who has achieved universal consciousness within himself. This is his stone. Because from that time on, everything is transmuted by his own understanding. Everything is transmuted by his own spiritual internal. Sin and death vanish from the world because man understands through them. Ignorance is gone forever. And all the problems and burdens of worldliness are transformed into the blessed recognition of truth. So by means of consciousness, truth is revealed in all things. Now, says the alchemist, when this powder of projection is placed in the 100,000 times its own weight of those metals, does it actually transform them? Does it take lead and change it into gold? The alchemist says not in that way. He says the reason why lead can be transformed into gold is because the spirit of gold is already present in the lead. You can form no transmutation unless the spirit of the metal you seek is already present under the surface or under the appearance of something else. Therefore, the discovery of truth is not the manufacture of truth, but the recognition of ever-existing truth. Universal consciousness cannot create truth, but it can discover truth and augment it in all things by an alchemical process, revealing truth and making it available as a positive expression of consciousness. In the same way,